In this video, I'm gonna give you a detailed look on the route of our 9,500 kilometer road trip through Scandinavia. Let's go! Hi and welcome to Behind the North, the show where I give you insights on a Norway road trip and behind the scenes of the show Nothing But North. And welcome to part 2 of my Norway road trip route explanation video. In the first part I explained to you how we got here from southern Germany all the way up to Bordeaux in northern Norway after a very nice week in southern Norway. And here we continue on the very peak of the Lofoten Islands. So I mentioned in my last video that we took the ferry from Bordeaux to Moskenes, and the ferry drops you off here, and on the first day we drove to Lofoten, which is the southernmost drivable point on the Lofoten Islands, checked it out, and then in the evening we drove to Rheine because there was not that good weather that day. We didn't went up to Rheinebringen, but we did this after sleeping here on this parking lot that night in the next morning. So we hiked up to Rheinebringen. It's very accessible because they built a stairway up on this mountain, but you have to keep in mind that you still cover an elevation of over 500 meters. But it's totally worth it. So it's one of the most insane spots on the Lofoten Islands, and you have a pretty good view here on the panorama of the Lofoten Islands. So we got back down to the car and then drove here to the little town, or I should say village of Hamnøy, because there's this bridge, and from here you have a very great view on this little huts and the scenery in the background. It's also another very famous Lofoten picture, and I also took my version of it. So we continued driving in the early afternoon here to Fredvang, where we parked the car, and then we took a hiking trail up here and then over here to the mountain named Rüten. And from there you have a great view on the Kvalvika beach, which is also a very famous site on the Lofoten. And we took a few photos here and then hiked down to the Kvalvika beach, checked that out, and then walked over here back to the car. So in the evening we drove all the way over to Ballstad, which is a little town on the Lofoten Islands, and stayed here at a camping ground in a nice scenery with a view on this port. And yeah, it was a pretty nice place. And when I will get back to Lofoten Islands one day, I will surely check it out again. So the next day we drove again up to the main road, which leads over the Lofoten Islands, and parked our car here to hike up to the Hollandsmellen mountain. And then from there we hiked down to the beach, checked that out, and then continued walking back to the car and drove over in the afternoon to the town of Henningsvær. Sorry for pronouncing the Norwegian name so bad, but I don't know how to pronounce it better, so yeah, don't be mad at me for doing that. And the town is famous for its football stadium, because you probably saw it on Instagram. It's very scenic, and I wanted to get a shot of it, but there were too many people, so we were a little bit frustrated, thought, okay, what can we do else in that town, and then found out that there is this very nice place, or it's a pretty nice mountain called Festvaktin, which allows you to have a great view on this town and all the small islands around it. And it also offers a great other side, which is the Preston, which is quite hidden. So I saw it on Instagram and tracked it down here with the road. So I saw the pictures, okay, I saw the angle of the road here, and then we tracked it down, and it also involved a little bit of climbing, so it was not like Rheinebringen with a stairway up. It was a little bit dangerous, so if you're not sure in the mountains, if you are not confident in your skills, don't do it. But we did it, and it worked well. We found it, we took our photos, and then climbed over the ridge to the Festwagthint and had a great sunset there. And it was just beautiful seeing the Lofoten Islands on the one side and seeing the mainland on the other side, and it was so sick. And it was one of the most beautiful evenings that we had on this road trip. So we got back when it already started getting dark, and then we said, okay, let's give it another try, go back to the Henningsvær football stadium, and there were almost no people there, and we got our shots, which was pretty nice. We even recorded a little music video on this football field, which was also very nice. And then we got back in the car and looked for a place where you could stay for night, and we found that here, and we parked next to the road and then just slept there. So the next day we went to our last site on the Lofoten Islands, which was in Svolvær. I guess that's how you pronounce this town, maybe or not. And we parked here, and then we hiked up to the Djevelporten. And here's one thing. So if you look for the main sites in Norway, there's also one site coming up named the Kerakbolten. It's a rock, a round rock, which is clamped between two other rocks. And you can go on it, and we initially planned to do it, but then we had a look at a few videos and we saw that people really need to jump from one rock on this particular rock, and we both found it really sketchy, and we said, okay, let's don't do it. But we found the Djevelporten, which is kind of like a miniature version of this on the Lofoten Islands. It's kind of like the same thing, rock, rock, rock here, clamped between it, but way less sketchier. And then we checked that out, took our photos, also hiked up here to the Fløya, and then back down to the car. And this concluded our adventure on the Lofoten Islands. That afternoon we left the Lofoten Islands and we drove almost to Narvik, but took a little detour here to a camping ground where we stayed that night. And what was also very nice, that this particular camping ground had a little hut with a kitchen that we could use on that day. And yeah, it was also nice just having some kind of shelter, because it was getting colder the further north we got. So next day we drove through Narvik further south. So for most of the time on this trip so far we only drove north, but this day was an exception because we want to check out the mountain called Stettinen. It is actually Norway's national mountain and it's looking really insane. So it's kind of like a pyramid. And unfortunately that day the peak was covered with a cloud, but it also looked insane. We took a photos here and then it started raining, so we said, okay, let's move on and continue our journey north. And we drove from here to the island of Senja, which is the second largest island of Norway. And here we checked out the little island on the island, or next to the island, of Husøy, which is a town on the island. It looks kind of like a fort. We checked that out and then settled down that night a bit more outside of this town here at this viewpoint. And this, together with Tubvatnet, was one of the most insane camping spots that we had on this road trip, and we had a very great view on the scenery. So we spent the night here, and the next day we wanted to go to the other side, but we had to take a longer road. It kind of looks like a detour, but it's the only road that goes there to Fjordgard. And what is so exciting about Fjordgard, town not, but there is this cool mountain called Segla. It's a giant rock, but we didn't went on the Segla, which you also can do, but we hiked up to Heston. First we hiked up here and then to Heston, and from there you have a pretty great view on the Segla. So we checked out that and then walked down to the car after we got our shots, and then drove in the late afternoon to the viewpoint Tungeneset, which gives you an insane view on this nice rock formation here. And that's also where we spent the night. So we spent the night here on this parking spot, and it also had a toilet here, so really cool. Also running water, which was very nice for cleaning the dishes, etc. And next day we left Senja, so we had kind of like a round trip here on Senja and then continued our journey further north. And this was again a full driving day. We just stopped here in Alta to get groceries. It's a bigger town for Norwegian standards. And then we continued driving further to the North Cape and stopped that night in Ollefjord at the camping ground, which also had a shower, which was very nice. And then the next morning we drove up to the last side of our trip, to the overall goal, to the peak, to the summit, and the zenith, however you want to call it, the North Cape, the northernmost drivable point in continental Europe. And yeah, it was pretty insane. It was pretty windy. We had a great time here at the North Cape, trying to get not blown away by the wind. And we took our photos here at North Cape Globe. And because it was so windy, we didn't stay such a long time at the North Cape. And while for the last 2.5 weeks on this trip, the goal or the claim was nothing but north, it switched around to nothing but south. So now we wanted to get home. We went to the car and drove all the way down. And I will cover also this part of the trip because we didn't took the same route down south as we did up north. And it started splitting here near Alta. So here we continued our journey south, and we actually drove around 100 kilometers here through Finland, which was also quite nice. So we can say we were in Finland on our road trip. And then we crossed the border to Sweden that night and settled down here somewhere near Övre Sopero. It sounds a little bit Swedish, a little bit Spanish, but I don't know how it's pronounced, like always here on this road trip. And we settled down here outside of the village next to the road, which was totally fine because the road was not that frequent. I think we didn't hear even a car passing that night. And this was also the spot where we witnessed one of the most insane natural spectaculars I've ever experienced, or which Earth has to offer. And you know what I mean? I mean aurora. Aurora borealis, or how you can also call it northern lights, polar lights, arctic lights, however you want to call it. They were absolutely insane. So in the beginning they were very weak, but then they got so strong that we could actually see them with our own eyes and not just with the camera. And it was a wonderful experience, and also really the great end of a truly insane road trip. So I was really happy because it's not very common to see them in the end of August, but we did, and this was also quite nice. So for the rest of the trip, the next day we had again a full driving day. We were driving, I guess, 12 or 13 hours or even longer. So we drove down to the Baltic Sea, and then along the Baltic Sea almost to Stockholm. So we stopped around 150 kilometers in front of Stockholm, somewhere nearby the, what do I say in Germany, the Autobahn, the highway, and had here at another road here our campsite, so we slept here. So the next day we continued our drive down to Stockholm, past Stockholm, and then drove to the other side of Sweden to Malmö, and here we again took the Öresund bridge over to Denmark, but we took another route as we did on the way up, because the ferry between Fehmarn and Denmark is really expensive. So we drove here over mainland Denmark and then drove down to Hamburg, and we had south of Hamburg our stop here for that night, which was the last stop on this road trip. So next day we drove down to southern Germany to our homes. So this concludes my Norway road trip route explanation video. I hope that I have provided you a great overview and also some insights on this truly insane trip. And for further content, keep subscribing to this YouTube channel. There will be coming a lot more Norway content on this YouTube channel. There will be the show Nothing But North, but there will also be some more episodes of Behind the North, where I will give you further insights on the costs, on the camper, etc. and everything you want to know on this Norway road trip. Post your questions down below and I might make a video about it. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye.